Hi, enjoy listening. Ethan Walker sat across from his boss, unsure if he had heard correctly. The office, usually buzzing with the noise of phones and printers, had gone silent, as if the entire law firm was eavesdropping. "Ethan," said Mr. Turner, the senior partner, in a calm, almost gentle voice. "Do you realize what you've done?" "Yes, sir," Ethan answered. His voice trembled, but his eyes stayed steady. "I stood up for a woman who was hit in a crosswalk. No one else cared. I did what was right." Turner leaned back, folding his hands. "She's homeless, a nobody. The young man who hit her is Daniel Hayes, the mayor's son. There are differences in status you clearly don't understand." "With all due respect, sir," Ethan said, "status doesn't matter. She was a pedestrian. He was behind the wheel. She's in the hospital, and he hasn't even visited." Turner's expression hardened. "You don't seem to grasp how things work. If you can't see the difference between a homeless woman and the family that runs this city, then you don't belong here." Ethan felt the words hit him like a slap. Fired for honesty, for justice. Around him, colleagues who had once nodded politely in the hallway now watched him with thin-lipped disapproval. Ethan realized no one would defend him. They had careers, mortgages, reputations. He had only his conscience. He thought back to that night, a month earlier. He had just left the movies with Chloe, his girlfriend of 2 months. They'd eaten dessert at a cafe, laughed about nothing, and parted ways with a kiss. Ethan had been walking home, full of cautious hope about his future. The screech of tires shattered that mood. A scream followed, then the sickening thud of a body striking metal. Ethan ran toward the sound. A woman lay crumpled on the asphalt, groaning faintly. She looked older than she probably was. Her face lined, her clothes torn. Another young woman rushed over too. A nurse, she later introduced herself as Grace Miller. Together, they bent down to help. From the car stepped Daniel Hayes. Tall, expensively dressed, bored more than shaken. He glanced at the dent in his bumper before giving them a dismissive look. "Tell her she owes me for the damage." He scoffed. "You hit her," Ethan snapped. "On a crosswalk," Daniel smirked. "Do you know who I am?" "I know you're reckless, and if necessary, I'll represent her." Daniel's laugh was sharp, cruel. "I'm the mayor's son. Watch yourself, lawyer. People who mess with me regret it. And that," he pointed at the woman bleeding on the pavement, "that's trash. Be glad I cleaned up the streets a little." He climbed back into his car and drove off without another glance. Grace muttered, "Kit thinks he's royalty. Someone should clip his wings." Together, they waited for the ambulance. Grace rode with the injured woman, while Ethan stayed to give a statement to the police. Later, he and Grace exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch about the woman's condition. Her name, they learned, was Marianne Collins. Broken leg, fractured ribs, concussion. No ID, no family to contact. Grace brought her clothes from her late mother's closet, insisting she couldn't be left in a hospital gown. Ethan visited too, asking about her past, but Marianne shut down every time. Then one evening, a police officer brought papers for her to sign. A waiver saying she had no claims. Ethan intercepted it. "She's not signing. She needs treatment, not silence money." The officer gave him a cold look. You don't want to get involved. Not against the mayor. Ethan had stayed involved, and now he was unemployed. He left the firm that afternoon, his box of belongings under his arm. On the street, he dialed Chloe. She answered on speaker, her tone flat. They fired me, Ethan said quietly, because I stood up for Marianne. Silence. Then Chloe's voice, icy. So you threw away your career for some homeless drunk? She's not a drunk. She was hit by a car. And now you're broke. You think I'm going to build a future with a man who chooses a nobody over his own life? Don't call me again. The line went dead. Ethan stood frozen on the sidewalk, holding the useless phone in his hand. That night, Grace called. Ethan, can you help tomorrow? Marianne's being discharged. She has nowhere to go. I'll take her in, but I can't carry her up 4 flights of stairs by myself. Yes, Ethan said at once. I'll be there. He had no job, no girlfriend, no plan. But he had something stronger. He had the truth, and now 2 people who needed him. Grace lived in a small walk-up apartment on the edge of downtown. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was safe enough. And the apartment carried traces of her late mother, a vase of dried flowers on the counter, a crocheted blanket over the couch, family pictures still on the walls. Getting Marianne up the stairs was brutal. Ethan carried most of her weight, while Grace steadied her from the other side. By the time they reached the 4th floor, Ethan's shirt was soaked with sweat, and Marianne was trembling with pain. Don't apologize, Grace said firmly, when Marianne whispered sorry for the 10th time. You didn't ask for this. You deserve help. Ethan lowered her gently into the armchair by the window. The city stretched below, noisy and indifferent. Marianne sat stiff, gripping the armrests, as if afraid someone might throw her back outside. Grace unpacked the bag of clothes she'd brought. These were Mum's, she explained softly. She passed last year. I couldn't bring myself to give them away. Maybe it was for this reason. Marianne touched the fabric reverently, her eyes wet. Your mother must have been kind. Thank you. Ethan sat on the couch across from her. Marianne, did you have any documents? ID? Anything? She shook her head quickly. Lost. Long time ago. Her voice dropped, guarded. She wouldn't say more. For the next few days, Ethan visited daily. He cooked with Grace, helped adjust Marianne's splint, argued with the insurance office about covering treatment. He also learned how quickly rumors spread. Word of his firing reached people he barely knew. Other attorneys, old classmates. Some avoided him now. Others whispered that he was finished in the city. But Ethan refused to back down. One afternoon, while Grace was at work, he sat with Marianne and tried again. You don't have to tell me everything, he said gently. But the mayor's family is pushing hard to blame you. If I'm going to defend you, I need to know what they might use against you. Marianne's hands shook in her lap. For a moment, Ethan thought she would stay silent again. Then she exhaled. They already know, she said hoarsely. Robert Hayes knows everything. That's why he wants me gone, because I'm not a stranger to him. Ethan leaned forward. What do you mean? Her gaze locked on his. raw and tired. Robert Hayes is not only the mayor. He's the man who ruined my life 25 years ago. Before Ethan could speak, the buzzer rang downstairs. Grace's voice came through the intercom. "Ethan, it's me. Let me up." Ethan pressed the button, his mind racing. By the time Grace walked in with groceries, he still hadn't found words. Marianne sat in silence, staring out the window, as if the city lights might swallow her secrets again. But Ethan knew the truth had begun to break through. And if it was what he suspected, the Hayes family was about to face a scandal bigger than they ever imagined. The next morning, Ethan found Marianne awake early, staring at the skyline as if bracing herself. Grace had left for her shift at the hospital, and the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of traffic outside. "I didn't sleep," Marianne said. "If you're going to help me, you should know the truth." Ethan nodded, pulling up a chair. "I was 20 when I met Robert Hayes." She began slowly. "He wasn't mayor then, just a rising politician with connections. I was working at a diner near City Hall. He came in often. He was charming, powerful. I was naive." Her hands twisted in her lap. "When I found out I was pregnant, I thought he'd do the right thing. Instead, he panicked. His wife, Linda, was also expecting at the same time. He couldn't let the world know about me, so he made sure no one did." Ethan's chest tightened. "What happened to the baby?" Marianne swallowed hard. "He took him. Told me if I tried to claim him, I'd regret it. He said the baby would be raised as his wife's child, and I would disappear. And then he made good on his threat. Men came. They beat me. They took my ID, put me on a bus to another state with nothing but a hospital gown and a warning. If I came back, I'd be buried." Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "I survived. Barely. Worked odd jobs, slept in shelters, never stayed long in one place. Every year I thought about returning. Every year I was afraid. Until now." Ethan's breath caught. "Daniel Hayes?" Marianne nodded. "He's my son." The words hung in the room like a live wire. Ethan tried to imagine the headlines. A mayor who built his career on family values, hiding a secret like this. Marianne shook her head. "I don't want revenge. I don't want to ruin Daniel's life. But I can't let them blame me for that accident. And I won't let Robert bury me again." Ethan leaned forward. "Then we fight. In court, in the open. If the truth comes out, it comes out. But no one is going to make you disappear again." That afternoon, Ethan began drafting motions, preparing to argue that Marianne was not only the victim, but also being set up. He knew the risks. No firm would touch him. Judges would be pressured. The Hayes family had money and power to crush him. But he also knew the stakes were bigger than one case. Grace returned that evening, dropping her bag on the counter. Ethan told her what he had learned. She listened in stunned silence. "God," she whispered, "all those years, and now her own son almost killed her." "She doesn't want him destroyed," Ethan said. "But Robert Hayes, he's terrified of the truth." Grace looked from Ethan to Marianne, then back. "If you're going to take this on, you won't be safe either." Ethan met her eyes. "I don't care. Someone has to stand up. For the first time in days, Marianne smiled faintly. You remind me of the boy I once hoped my son would grow into. Ethan felt the weight of her words, heavier than any case he had ever dreamed of handling. The battle against the Hayes family was no longer just about justice. It was about truth, blood, and survival. Robert Hayes sat in his office at City Hall, the blinds drawn. The room smelled of polished wood and old cigar smoke. Daniel paced near the window, restless, while Linda sat stiffly in a chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. They say that lawyer kid, Walker, filed paperwork this morning, Robert said, his voice low and edged with anger. He's representing her. Daniel stopped pacing. The homeless woman? You're kidding. She's nothing. Robert slammed his fist against the desk, startling them both. She's not nothing. She's Marianne. And if Walker puts her on the sand, everything I buried 25 years ago could come crawling back to life. Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. I told you to deal with her back then without violence, but you wouldn't listen. Robert shot her a warning glare. Don't start, Linda. Not now. Daniel frowned, confused. Wait, what are you two talking about? Neither parent answered right away. Robert stood and poured himself a drink, the amber liquid shaking slightly in his glass. You don't need to know, he muttered. But Daniel wasn't a child anymore. You mean there's more to this than some bum getting in my way? Why's this such a big deal? Robert turned, his eyes dark. Because if she speaks, she can destroy us. You, me, this entire family. Linda finally spoke, her voice cracking. She's your mother, Daniel. The words landed like a gunshot. Daniel froze, his mouth open, his face draining of colour. What? Robert cursed under his breath. Damn it, Linda. He set down the glass, hard enough that liquid sloshed over the rim. Fine, she gave birth to you. But she's no mother. She was nothing more than a mistake I fixed before it could ruin my life. Daniel stumbled back, shaking his head. You mean I've been living a lie? That woman out there, bleeding in the street, was my mother. And you let me... He broke off, unable to finish. Robert stepped forward, grabbing his son's shoulder. Listen to me. None of that matters. What matters is keeping this quiet. If the public finds out, my career is over. Your future is gone. And she'll drag us all down. Daniel jerked free. Maybe you deserve to go down. Robert's face hardened into stone. Careful, son. Linda rose from her chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. You can't silence this forever, Robert. People like Ethan Walker don't back down. And Marianne, she's stronger than you ever believed. Robert's jaw tightened. He turned toward the window, the city stretching out below him, like a kingdom he refused to lose. Then I'll do what I should have done the moment she came back, he said coldly. End this, for good. The courthouse smelled of dust and stale coffee. Reporters crowded the steps, their cameras clicking as Ethan Walker pushed through the doors, with Marianne on crutches at his side. Grace flanked her, carrying a bag with medications and water. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet speculation. Everyone in the city knew this case wasn't only about a car accident. It was about the mayor, his son, and whatever secrets they were hiding. Judge Franklin Reed entered, his gavel calling for silence. His reputation was cautious, some said cowardly, but today his eyes carried a wary alertness. He knew the cameras outside were waiting for every decision. The prosecutor rose first, laying out the official story. A homeless woman, intoxicated, had stepped recklessly into the crosswalk, leaving young Daniel Hayes no chance to stop. She is fortunate he's a forgiving young man, the prosecutor concluded, his tone heavy with disdain. He has agreed not to seek damages for the vehicle, but the city must not allow false claims from a woman with no standing and no credibility. Ethan stood. His heart pounded, but his voice rang clear. Your Honor, this woman has credibility. She is a citizen, a human being, and she was struck by a car while crossing legally. The Hayes family has attempted to silence her. Not because of who she is, but because of who they are. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Robert Hayes shifted uneasily in his seat behind the prosecution's table, Daniel staring fixedly at the floor. Linda sat apart from them, pale, her hands clasped tightly. Ethan continued. I will present evidence that not only was Marianne Collins the victim of a reckless driver, but that she was deliberately targeted to be silenced, because Marianne Collins is not a stranger to the Hayes family. Robert shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant. Defamatory. Judge Reed's gavel cracked. Sit down, Mayor Hayes. The objection is noted. Mr. Walker, continue, but tread carefully. Ethan nodded. Marianne Collins is Daniel Hayes' biological mother. The courtroom erupted. Journalists scribbled furiously. Phones buzzed with texts, and the gallery erupted in whispers. Daniel's head snapped up, his face white. Robert barked, Lies! But his voice was drowned out by the noise. Judge Reed slammed his gavel again, demanding order. His eyes bore into Ethan. You will substantiate this claim, Mr. Walker, or face contempt. Ethan drew a breath. I will. I have hospital records from 25 years ago, showing that Robert Hayes' mistress gave birth to a healthy baby boy on the same night Linda Hayes delivered a stillborn. The infant was transferred into Linda Hayes' care. The mistress was threatened, beaten, stripped of identification, and exiled from the city. That mistress is sitting here today, Marianne Collins. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise before. Reporters' dawn made with ambiguity. Pens froze. The judge leaned back, his jaw tight. Daniel pushed back his chair, stumbling to his feet. Is it true? His voice cracked, echoing across the chamber. Dad, Mum, is it true? Robert said nothing. His lips were pressed in a hard, bloodless line. Linda covered her face with her hands. Daniel's voice rose, shaking. You told me she was trash! You told me she was nothing! And you, he pointed at Marianne, trembling. You're my mother! Marianne steadied herself on her crutches. Her eyes filled, but her voice was soft, unbroken. Yes, I am. The judge cleared his throat. We will recess until tomorrow morning. His gavel struck, but the courtroom was already in chaos. Ethan guided Marianne and Grace out past flashing cameras. He knew the real trial was only beginning. And Robert Hayes had just lost the first battle. The Hayes home no longer felt like a fortress. Reporters camped at the gates. Helicopters buzzed overhead. and angry chants from protesters drifted through the manicured lawns. Inside, tension pressed down like a storm. Robert paced the study, barking orders into the phone. Control the press. Threaten the networks if you have to. And tell Franklin Reed his career is over if he doesn't rein this in. He slammed the receiver down and poured himself another drink. Linda sat on the sofa, her face pale, eyes swollen from tears. You can't bully your way out of this, Robert. The truth is out. People know. Robert whirled on her. They don't know anything. Walker doesn't have enough to prove it. All we need to do is discredit her. She's a drunk, a vagrant. No jury will believe her. Daniel stood in the doorway, his shirt untucked, his face drawn. I believe her. Robert froze. Don't you dare say that. Daniel stepped inside, his voice rising. She looked me in the eye, Dad. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't lying to me. You've been lying to me for 25 years. Robert's jaw tightened. I gave you everything. A name, a future. You'd rather throw it away for a woman who abandoned you. Linda's voice cracked. She didn't abandon him, Robert. You forced her out. I knew it. Even back then, I was too afraid to stop you. Daniel turned on her. And you went along with it. You raised me like your trophy. Linda covered her face, sobbing. Robert slammed his glass on the desk. Enough! Tomorrow, Walker will put her on the stand. He'll try to paint her as a saint. And you, he jabbed a finger at Daniel, will sit in that courtroom and keep your mouth shut. If you open it, you'll destroy this family. Daniel's eyes burned with anger. This family was destroyed the moment you decided power mattered more than people. He turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. Across town, in Ethan's small office, the atmosphere was different. Marianne sat nervously at the table, wringing her hands. Grace rubbed her shoulders, whispering encouragement. Ethan spread papers across the desk. Hospital records, affidavits, witness statements. Tomorrow they'll tear into you, Ethan said plainly. They'll call you a liar, a drunk, a whore. They'll drag up every mistake you've made. Marianne's voice shook. And what if I break? Ethan leaned forward. Then they win. You've survived worse than a courtroom. You've survived the streets. You survived Robert Hayes. Look him in the eye tomorrow and make him afraid for once. Marianne swallowed hard. Grace clasped her hand, steady and warm. Ethan gathered the files into a neat stack. We're not here to humiliate you. We're here to prove you're human. That's something Robert Hayes can't stand. Outside, sirens wailed in the night, carrying the city's restless energy. Both sides braced for a battle that would no longer be about law alone. Tomorrow, the fight would be about truth. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, cameras barred, but reporters scribbling furiously. The air was thick with anticipation. Marianne adjusted her crutches as she made her way to the witness stand. The limp in her step, the tremor in her hand, none of it escaped the jury's eyes. Grace sat in the gallery, silently urging her on. Ethan walked beside her, carrying the weight of strategy and faith. Judge Reed spoke calmly. Miss Collins, please take the stand. She swore the oath, her voice steady, though her knuckles were white against the rail. Ethan began. Ms. Collins, can you tell the court where you were on the night of August 12th? Marianne nodded. I was at the corner of 7th and Main. I had been given some food from a shelter earlier that day. I was crossing the street when a car came at me. I saw the headlights, and then I woke up in the hospital. Ethan kept his questions short, deliberate. Do you recognize the driver of that car? Her eyes moved slowly to Daniel. He looked back at her, pale, guilt etched across his face. Yes, it was him. The gallery buzzed. Judge Reed called for silence. Ethan pressed on. Why do you believe you were targeted? Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. Because I am his mother, and his father, Robert Hayes, never wanted me alive to say it. Gasps filled the room. Ethan let the silence linger. He turned to the judge. No further questions at this time. The prosecutor, a sharp man in a navy suit, rose with a thin smile. Miss Collins, let's speak plainly. You've lived on the streets for decades, correct? Yes. You've been arrested for vagrancy, for public intoxication. You've spent nights in jail. Yes. You've used drugs. Her jaw tightened. Yes. So you're asking this jury to believe the word of a woman with a history of crime, addiction, and instability over the word of the mayor's family. Marianne's voice trembled, but she lifted her chin. Yes, because the truth doesn't vanish just because I suffered. The prosecutor sneered. Or maybe you're bitter. Maybe you invented this story for sympathy, for money, for revenge. He paced closer. Tell me, Miss Collins, how much is Mr. Walker paying you to say these things? I'm not being paid, she said firmly. Of course not, he said with mock sweetness. But let's talk about Robert Hayes. You claim he threatened you 25 years ago. Do you have recordings, letters, witnesses? No, she admitted. So we're supposed to take the word of a homeless addict against the word of a sitting mayor. Her eyes flickered toward Robert. His expression was ice. Then she turned back to the prosecutor, her voice quiet but clear. Yes, because he knows I'm telling the truth. And deep down, so does his son. The prosecutor's smile faltered. He turned to Daniel. Mr. Hayes is not on trial here. Stick to the questions. Marianne's hands trembled on the rail. Her voice rose. You can call me a drunk. You can call me a failure. But you cannot erase me. I gave birth to him, and Robert Hayes took everything from me. That is the truth. The courtroom erupted again. Judge Reed hammered his gavel, shouting for order. Ethan rose. Your Honor, may we recess until the afternoon? Judge Reed studied Marianne's trembling frame, then nodded. Court will reconvene at 2:00. As Marianne was helped down from the stand, Daniel's eyes followed her. He looked as though he'd been struck. Robert leaned close to him, whispering sharply, but Daniel didn't respond. For the first time, the jury had seen not just a homeless woman, but a mother. The afternoon heat pressed against the courthouse windows, but inside, the air felt colder than steel. Daniel Hayes sat at the defense table, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He could still hear her words. I gave birth to him. Robert leaned close. Don't look at her. Don't even breathe in her direction. His whisper was poison. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes flicked to Marianne, seated beside Ethan and Grace. She looked small, fragile, but her gaze was steady. When she caught Daniel watching, she didn't glare or accuse. She only looked at him with a quiet grief that twisted his gut. The defense called its witnesses, police officers, city employees, a doctor willing to testify Marianne had no medical proof linking her to Daniel. Each voice echoed the same message. She was a liar, a ghost, a stain. But Daniel couldn't stop seeing the truth every time she looked at him. At the recess, he followed Linda into a quiet hallway. She'd been sitting apart from Robert all day, her hands trembling in her lap. "Tell me the truth," Daniel said. His voice cracked, but his eyes were sharp. "Is she my mother?" Linda's tears spilled again. "Yes." Daniel staggered back against the wall. "And you knew? All this time?" "I held you in my arms the day you were born. I was so broken, Daniel. My own baby was gone. And Robert told me this was the only way. He said no one would ever know." Daniel's throat burned. "You raised me on a lie!" "I loved you," Linda whispered, "but I stole you. And I let him destroy her. I don't expect you to forgive me." Daniel turned away, but the pain in her voice hollowed him out. When court resumed, Ethan requested permission to call an unexpected witness. "Mr. Daniel Hayes," he said. The courtroom gasped. Robert slammed his hand on the table. "Absolutely not! He's my son! He has no standing!" Judge Reed's voice cut sharp. "He has standing if he chooses to speak. Mr. Hayes, will you testify?" All eyes locked on Daniel. His father's glare was a blade, his mother's tears a chain, and Marianne's gaze a lifeline. Slowly, Daniel stood. "Yes, Your Honor." He walked to the stand, his steps unsteady but certain. He raised his hand, swore the oath, and sat. Ethan approached. "Daniel, do you know Marianne Collins?" Daniel's voice was low but clear. "She's my mother." The words fell like a hammer. The gallery erupted. The jury leaned forward, and Robert Hayes went pale. Ethan's next question cut straight through the silence. "And has your father spent 25 years trying to erase her?" Daniel looked at Robert. For the first time, he didn't look away. "Yes." Robert shot to his feet, shouting, "Lies! He's confused!" But it was too late. The damage was done. The courtroom felt like a powder keg. Every camera outside, every reporter in the gallery, every juror leaning forward, waiting for the explosion. Daniel's words still hung in the air. "She's my mother." Robert Hayes stood, face flushed, sweat beading on his temples. "My son is mistaken. He's been manipulated by that lawyer and this woman who's been poisoning him with lies." Judge Reed's gavel cracked. "Sit down, Mayor Hayes, or you'll be removed from this courtroom." Robert didn't sit. His voice thundered. "You think you can drag me through the mud? I built this city. I gave it order, jobs, a future. And you?" He pointed at Marianne, his hand shaking. "You were nothing but a mistake I corrected." Gasps filled the room. The jury's eyes widened. Ethan didn't move, letting the mayor destroy himself. Marianne rose slowly on her crutches, her voice breaking but clear. "You didn't correct anything. You stole a child. You stole my life. And no amount of power can wash that away." Robert's face twisted. "You were weak. You were unfit. Without me, he would have been nothing. Daniel stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "No, Dad. Without her, I wouldn't even exist." The silence that followed was devastating. Robert's chest heaved, his composure shattered. Judge Reed leaned forward, his voice stern. "I have heard enough. This trial is not about your ego, Mayor Hayes. It is about accountability. And from what I've seen today, the truth has already spoken louder than any verdict I could deliver." Robert lunged, as if to speak again, but Linda caught his arm. For the first time in years, she looked at him with nothing but contempt. "Stop, Robert. It's over." He yanked free, but the fight drained from him. He collapsed into his chair, the image of a king stripped of his crown. When court adjourned, the gallery erupted in noise. Reporters rushed for the exits to feed the headlines, already writing themselves. Outside, flashes blinded Marianne as she stood on the courthouse steps. Grace supported her, Ethan at her side. Daniel stood a few feet away, torn, lost, but no longer under his father's shadow. A reporter shouted, "Miss Collins, how does it feel to finally be heard?" Marianne gripped her crutch, her eyes wet but shining, like breathing for the first time in 25 years. Ethan touched her shoulder gently. "You did it!" She shook her head. "We did it. All of us." For the first time in decades, Marianne Collins stood not as a ghost of the past, but as a mother reclaimed, a woman unbroken. And Robert Hayes, once untouchable, was already fading into history. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.